So if we had to go back to the beginning in terms of how a pharma leader should be auditing an AI model that they plan to use for their clinical research.
First and foremost is AI architecture and how that model has been made, who made it, and is it AI native fundamentally in its design and engineering. What I mean by AI native is a artificial intelligence that has been fundamentally designed, engineered, and audited, as well as all of its cybersecurity is oriented around the bottleneck that you're trying to solve. It's not retrofitted, and the AI has learned from a model that has been kind of built in-house for that purpose.
What needs to happen before autonomous AI can safely play a bigger role in clinical trials in terms of agentic AI?
Let's talk about some of the bottlenecks with agentic AI. It's difficult to audit. So oftentimes, in the first instance, is often built on top of other models. So it's being applied as what we call a wrapper, retrospectively on a black box model. So that's problem number one. It's not safe fundamentally. It's not designed or engineered safely.
Welcome to the Clinical Compass by Pharmatica.io, the podcast that explores the pharmaceutical life cycle through real-world insights and practical strategies. I'm your host, Shubhangi Dua, podcast producer and B2B journalist. This episode, we will be talking about how AI is impacting clinical research and why not every AI solution is coded for clinical trials. Joining us this episode is Dr. Amber Hill, founder and CEO of ResearchGrid, that specializes in AI-native solutions for clinical research. Together, we will unpack what's driving the move to AI-native platforms, why agentic AI may not yet be ready for regulated research, and what pharma leaders should be looking for when evaluating AI solutions. So welcome, Amber. How are you?
Good. Thank you so much for having me.
So great to have you on. So before we begin, is there one key message that you'd like to share with the audience so they stay tuned in?
I think one key message is that AI is broad and agentic AI is not yet ready for our industry. We're not ready to use it, and there's several reasons for that we should talk about.
For sure. Is there a particular agenda that you'd like to set before we dive into the mainstream conversation?
I think in terms of AI, what we need to discuss before we discuss anything is what we mean by AI in terms of discriminative and generative, the different models that you can consider when you're looking at different vendors, and then talk about agentic and all of the other models that are available to you moving forward.
Okay, great. So clinical trials have always struggled with delays and broken systems and manual processes for years. And I'm sure AI is now making that process a little bit easier. But of course, changing data regulations to impact how they can use AI. And that's kind of slowed the progress even more, some say. So why do you think that these challenges still persist despite so much investment in digital transformation?
I think there's a lot of investment in digital transformation, and companies are under significant pressure to include AI and to start building AI. The problem is that regulations haven't caught up to one, what they should be looking at and what they should be regulating. I think there's a lot of hesitations to regulate kind of thoroughly because the technology is evolving so much and so quickly. And so that all poses problems when you're talking about what is adaptable, what you can kind of audit within the space of artificial intelligence.
And AI, for obvious reasons, has also become the biggest conversation, of course. What are some of the trends that you're seeing?
Some trends that we are seeing is that the speed at which companies, particularly vendors, are attempting to adopt AI before knowing fully about the technology itself and the different types of models that they should be using, how to train AI on the right data sets and the right information, and also make those models traceable, I think is happening extremely fast. without the proper kind of parameters around it. So you hear a lot about kind of healthcare grade artificial intelligence and regulatory grade artificial intelligence. And essentially, I think what people are trying to push is that there are models that you can use and that have been fundamentally designed for trials and to be audited by regulatory bodies like the FDA or the MHRA. And then there are models that are open source that people are building on top of that are less safe to use. And so I think when the topic of AI kind of booming is organized around those themes in terms of what we should be looking at, what the opportunities are, and then maybe where the future is headed.
Yeah. So if we had to go back to the beginning in terms of how a pharma leader should be auditing an AI model that they plan to use for their clinical research, or from the other side, how a AI model owner, supplier, what they need to keep in mind before they provide their AI model for full accessibility to a pharma company.
Yes, I think on the side of the audit, where a sponsor or someone who wants to use an AI vendor, they should be thinking about in the common pitfalls. First and foremost is AI architecture and how that model has been made, who made it, and is it AI native in its fundamentally in its design and engineering. What I mean by AI native is a artificial intelligence that has been fundamentally designed, engineered, and audited, as well as all of its cybersecurity is oriented around the bottleneck that you're trying to solve. It's not retrofitted, and the AI has learned from a model that has been kind of built in house for that purpose. You also have scenarios where you don't influence that AI as much because of how it's been trained. So I think AI architecture is one of the first things. I can come back to some of the questions that they get asked around that. The second thing that they should be thinking about is the model ownership and production. So who has made that model? Is it a third party consultancy company? And does that vendor actually own that model? Or has it been designed and engineered in-house from the ground up in terms of they made the actual model? It's not been engineered on top of some sort of open source infrastructure like OpenAI or AWS or Anthropic or any of the other kind of providers. So that's the second kind of tier. Do they actually own the model? And are they in charge of the data that kind of goes onto those models? Who owns the data and the output that happens as well? That's another huge consideration. I think the third thing is data and infrastructure. Are we using pre-existing kind of third-party models to train the trial data? Also, has that data been given to a third party? So data that you've put onto a system in the past or present, have they then concluded that they own that data and given that to a third party that you don't actually want having that data in order to build their AI or their model? Or has it been built in-house in a secure environment? I think another thing is, has the clinical trial been trained on third-party data in general, or simulated data, or has it been trained on actual trial data and whose trial data, et cetera? So I think that's the third kind of consideration. And then the fourth consideration is governance and auditability. So you need to be ensuring that the models are traceable. And what I mean by that is if they have been designed in-house by the company, not by a third party, they own that model, they have developed the model from the ground up, not on a black box kind of system, then we have full traceability of the entire model and the entire ecosystem, not just part of it or not at all. So I think when you're thinking about traceability, you're thinking about if something were to go wrong, could that engineering team backtrack what's gone wrong and fix it, or do they not own the infrastructure in its entirety to actually go back far enough to actually fix the problem? Do they know why that model is making the outcome or producing the results that it is producing? And can they control that in any way in terms of traceability and auditability? So, can they provide audit logs or model cards or data sheets and model descriptions? So, all of those things are extremely important, I think, when you are trying to audit a vendor that is fundamentally AI.
I feel like AI has added a lot more components and as a result, a lot more complexity into what kind of data and the way you use it with so many other aspects into a clinical research. Isn't that more time prolonging, don't you think? Or do you think? Because I feel like AI is here to make things go faster and more accurately. But here I feel like it's more of the other.
I'm so glad that you said that. So, I think when you are, this is an important consideration as well. Like, do you need this AI model, are vendors kind of pitching you something AI for AI's sake? So that's a big question, even in the AI industry, where you are looking at improving models, et cetera. And I think this is also like why it's so important that the models are made and designed fundamentally for a pain point or a bottleneck within clinical trials. They should be designed fundamentally for a trial and not retrofit it to a bottleneck, which is another thing that a lot of companies are doing, is trying to, because just to say that they have AI, they're trying to retrofit a model that was fundamentally designed for something else to a clinical trial problem. And I think that is a problem within itself and will cause further delay or higher costs than it would be just having a human to run it. One of the things that we should also be considering is what actual pain point is the model addressing. So one of the things that we do at ResearchGrid is we're one of the only companies that can automate the full end-to-end cycle of clinical research, particularly the back office. So documents, data, comms, anything that's administrative that happens in terms of a bottleneck in the back that causes around 90% of trials to fail. One of the things that we look at that is extremely time consuming, for example, is we have the largest proprietary CRM network of communities, and we utilize that for recruitment. And so we can use a model to find any type of patient or person based on searchable criteria from the protocol in a matter of seconds. So instead of spending months and months to do it, we can do that at the touch of a button. I think the other consideration are like things like sites. For example, we can utilize AI and find every thing that you need in terms of infrastructure, et cetera, down to protocol or procedures in a matter of seconds. And so AI is very good at pattern recognition and certain things and kind of less good at other things. But there are ways that you can utilize AI and AI tools as much as they have been designed for that bottleneck, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. I was just wondering about some of the other challenges, or rather, some of the other things that the industry still gets wrong. Because despite so many solutions out there, especially now more enhanced solutions, because AI has been in the picture for a while, including like your company, Research Grid. With that, what is the industry still getting wrong?
Well, I would say AI has not actually been in the picture for a long time. When you think about kind of the story behind this, we have had the technology for a while, but it hasn't been in this industry for very long at all. When you think about ChatGPT, for example, launching November 2022, and then it was only at that point that we had mass public adoption of artificial intelligence that then kind of readied the market alongside regulations changing, like the FDA kind of broadening the scope of recruitment and diversity. And things like that kind of paired up against each other, made the perfect inflection point for our industry to really start considering the positives and the opportunity that we have for artificial intelligence within this industry itself. I think when you consider that, it actually hasn't been on the table for very long, and we're one of the only companies that has been developing it since before that point. And so, what the industry is actually getting wrong right now is trying to speak about artificial intelligence in a very uniform way that is not useful for understanding the technology and its capabilities. And so you rarely hear in the industry or at conferences or anywhere else where we are discussing discriminative artificial intelligence and the opportunities there versus generative artificial intelligence and the opportunities there, or what the difference in those actually fundamentally is. So one, you have, is trained on patterns. It recognizes those patterns, and the model will only produce an output that represents what it's been trained on. Whereas generative, it's also been trained on patterns, but it can take that information and then produce or create or generate something that it hasn't learned, and that is fundamentally kind of um, different to what it's learned. And so then there you've got hallucinations. It's more risky to use that type of model. And we can't talk about these categories of AI in the same way because they are not the same. And I think the education piece on AI and understanding it first is actually where we're going wrong. We're trying to skip over that and go to agentic, which is the latest model that there is, before even discussing the other options.
I was just going to ask you about Agentic AI next, so it's great that you brought it up. So, what is one thing that, or rather, what needs to happen before autonomous AI can safely play a bigger role in clinical trials in terms of Agentic AI?
So, agentic AI, let's talk about some of the bottlenecks with agentic AI. It's difficult to audit. So, oftentimes, okay, in the first instance, is often built on top of other models. So, it's being applied as what we call a wrapper, retrospectively on a black box model. So, that's problem number one. It's not safe fundamentally, it's not designed or engineered safely.
Just one thing, when you say black box models, I would just want to clarify, does that mean like wipe coded solutions, or what does it imply?
There are some vibe coded solutions that are on top of black box, but black box means the base model, the architecture is it was pre-existing before the company decided to build that model. So they're not building their own AI. What they're doing is repackaging ChatGPT to do a questions and answers infrastructure on a protocol, for example, or they're repackaging something else and just training that model to do something else when the model may have been designed for finance. And so black box means that they don't actually fundamentally own at the bottom, at the base of the architecture, the core model that it runs on. They've only trained it on something else. So if anything were to go wrong, it actually they have no idea what happened without contacting OpenAI or Google, which obviously that's their IP and they're not going to tell them. So I think there's a level where the architecture itself is not safe and it's not being built safe, and they're doing that to speed along and try and kind of speed forward or show the potential of it without actually having a well-versed understanding of the engineering behind it in the first place. It takes a long time actually to develop a model by yourself or internally within the team. And so I think in order to speed ahead, I think companies are often using black box models. You rarely have companies, especially legacy companies, that are able to use or to build an AI native infrastructure or model that they can use in their current system, because oftentimes those aren't compatible with the coding base that they have. So, legacy systems are usually built on the oldest coding base that there is, like C# or something like this. And in order to actually speed up and to have AI infrastructure within their system, it has to be a wrapper to work rather than AI native, because AI native would mean that they start over. So I think there's a level of understanding the architecture of agentic AI. Now, say in the case where somebody has developed their own model, the problem with agentic AI is fundamentally like a generative model where it hallucinates. So, generative models, because they generate or create new outputs that are meant to be, statistically probable, they sometimes, they will, and this from like ChatGPT, it'll make up references, it'll make up, trials that have never happened before. And so I think when you're thinking about the application of agentic AI in an already environment that is experimental, you have to really consider what applications are actually viable for this technology to exist in research. And that I think shouldn't belong everywhere, especially, but definitely where we see the most action happening right now is before a trial starts or after a trial ends, because the most data is there that they can train these models on. But to put agentic on a protocol, I think, is fundamentally irresponsible because it shouldn't actually be informing any of the science. It's not a model that is, it has a lot of potential and opportunity, but it's not a model that's ready for that because it can hallucinate. It can, it's not traceable. It's not auditable in that way. So, I think people, when they hear that agentic is traceable, I think the first question that they should ask is, did that company build that model from the ground up, or what architecture is this actually sitting on, to be able to determine if that's the truth or not? And then from there, assess the architecture itself to understand how it might be hallucinating or where it might be hallucinating and if it should be applied. So, I mean, when you're thinking about, this is one of the riskiest industries that there is, because you're dealing with human lives, you're dealing with experimental protocols, and you're dealing with, regulatory bodies where you might not get another shot at that clinical trial. And so I think people have to be very careful when they're deciding on AI vendors, to understand really the core of what those models are suggesting.
Yeah, I was speaking to someone the other day about this the AI hype versus the LLM reality. So we were talking about how they need to build like either specific machine learning models that is only tailored to that particular organization's, that particular clinical trial, to be able to accurately actually have a positive outcome and an accurate outcome. But then at every step of the way, they have to have that human verification for sure.
What I would say to that is it's not far off of the truth, especially with the models that are available today, but you don't actually need to tailor to every single trial. You need to tailor to the bottleneck that model is addressing. So you have multiple different types of artificial intelligence. You have natural language processing that is great for text-based problems. You have OCR, or optical character recognition, which is great for images. You have large language models, which is sometimes great for filling in missing information and pieces. And those belong in different on different bottlenecks and in different cases. So I think when you're thinking about AI, you have to pair it with the right pain point that is meant to address, and that's kind of exactly what we do. We have engineered each model towards a specific bottleneck that occurs usually in the back office that causes trials to kind of slow. And so what we have seen is that we're able to not only speed up the efficiency on each of those kind of modular tasks, whether that is anything from recruitment right through to your ETMF, your EDC, your finance modules, eCOA, ePro, eSource. So any kind of aspect throughout the trial that you often see, a quality bottleneck, or an administrative bottleneck with staff, or any type of slow processing that's been being done manually, we can speed that up. And usually that is uniform throughout different trials. So, each trial is different fundamentally, but the workflow behind each of those will have similar kind of characteristics and features that those models can be applied to. Of course, when you get the documentation and things, you put that into your model and it trains on that specific case study, but it doesn't mean that you have to change the model every single time. So I think that's kind of what I mean by it's really important to understand the core basis of what's happening under each scenario that you are addressing with artificial intelligence. It's not a uniform problem that you can address with one core model.
Okay, that's a good differentiator to know. Focus on the foundation essentially, right?
Yeah.
So, if you're a pharma executive evaluating AI solutions today, what's the one question every leadership team should be asking before they invest?
Is this AI native? I think, is it AI native? Have you made this model? And if not, that should open a whole wealth of questions. And I think at the core of that is this fundamentally auditable, traceable, and where does the responsibility lie? It's not going to be on the AI or on that vendor. It's actually going to be on the what the FDA has said is it's the responsibility of the research team. And so I think at the core of this, the risk analysis needs to really pay attention to the architecture, the ownership, and the infrastructure in order to actually properly govern and audit AI.
Okay. So we're now nearly at the end of the podcast. Is there one key message that you have for pharma leaders out there and something that they should definitely be mindful of?
I think pharma leaders should be mindful of the questions that they ask and to ensure that the questions that they're asking companies about AI and otherwise is not outdated. So the questions that they should be asking about AI have never existed before. The way that they assess AI companies has never existed before. So I think that needs to catch up as well. When you're talking about assessing an AI vendor, you need modern questions to assess that vendor generally. So I think that's something to take away and to think about. And you're not getting those questions from a legacy vendor who is not building their own tech. They're using consultancy companies. I think they need to have some roundtables or some sessions even with startups with who are well versed in the new technology, or companies like ours who have been building this since before it became a thing, where we can just talk about, even if from an unbiased lens, I'm really passionate about making sure that the education piece around AI is there as a basic foundation before you start investing in artificial intelligence generally, and that education needs a trickle down effect. So it's not just leadership, it's staff, it's the teams, it's your innovation teams that are assessing this, and they need a better set of questions to really understand what they're looking at when they're seeing AI. It's not just a flashy technology, it's a tool, but it does have its risks, and you need to understand those risks at their core. And that kind of boils down to understanding the architecture and the models that are running under it.
So we're at the end of the podcast now. Thank you so much, Amber, for joining us and sharing your
Thank you.
insights today. As AI adoption accelerates across the industry, it's clear that success won't come from adopting the newest technology, but rather the right one for your particular organization. So make sure to have a very strong AI architectural foundation and governance decisions. For more information on what we've talked about, please visit grit.tech. To our Pharmatica community, thanks for tuning in. If you found this episode valuable, please follow, rate, and share. Join the conversation on X and LinkedIn at pharmatica.io, or visit our website for further expert insights. Thank you.